Okay, so let's now take that Bolin Academy website and extend it in 3 ways. First, I'll show you how to write some custom interactions and change the behavior of your site using JavaScript and the Wix Code APIs. Then I'll show you how to call external APIs to further augment your site with things that are available out there on the internet. And third, we'll do the reverse, and we'll expose an API for the rest of the world to integrate with us. We're looking at the page that exhibits student artwork at the end of each semester. And what I'd like to do is make this a little bit more interactive. What I'd like to do is save how many times each one of these is viewed and also allow voting on these pages. So if I go to the database collection that drives this page, it's simple for me to add 2 new fields. I'm going to call the first one vote count, and that's a number. And I'm going to call the second one view count. And now that I have where to store this information, let's jump back to the page so I can show you how to use that on your page. So I've prepared 2 text elements here, and these are simple Wix text elements. And that's remarkable because it means that everything I know about Wix and all of the ease of creating my layouts and designs in the Wix editor carries over to web application development and holds true. So I'm going to take that first text element and use our new connect option to connect it to view count, and then I'll use the same connect panel to connect this text element to the vote count. And now each one of those pages exhibiting these pieces of art will be showing those votes and views. So let's set up that interaction. I've prepared a heart here, which is a simple Wix image, and in making web development more accessible, we've taken all of the elements that you can add in the editor and we've enriched them with the JavaScript API, which means that I can easily write JavaScript which manipulates my elements and also reacts to things that are happening within them. And if I take a look at the properties panel over here, I can see what events my element exposes, and in this case I want to react to the onClick event. So I'll press that plus, which brings up our code editor. This is where I write my JavaScript. And I'll use our $W selector. Our $W selector is the way to find elements on the page. And I've named this element heart, so it's easy for me to find. And I'm going to ask that it hide. And you'll notice that the code completion comes up telling me what I can do at each step of the way. So for example, that's an image, I can set the source, but in this case I'm going to hide it because I've actually hidden a red heart behind it and I want it to show. The second thing I want to do is I want to show this thanks box. That's just a box showing these elements that thank the user for voting. So I'll find it using the same selector, and this time I'm going to ask it to show. And I'll use the slide in animation so that it's animated. So I literally wrote 2 lines of code that are very specific to my case and help me create that interaction without having to deal with all of the configuration around it. So now if I click on that heart, you'll see that interaction happening. Let's complete it with the data side of things. And much like we've made the elements available to JavaScript, we've also made the database accessible through these APIs. And so when the page is loaded, I want it to increment the view count and save it back. And when the heart is clicked, I also want to increment the vote count and save it back to the database. And now when I preview this, you'll see that Built with Glass currently has 0 votes. And when I click on it, it'll now have 1, and that will be stored in the database. That shows you the custom interaction. Let's now take this one step further. I thought it would be nice if, as our visitors are voting on these artworks, the artist behind them could receive an email. And of course, I didn't want to write an email server myself. I wanted to go out to the internet and find someone who has already done that. And in fact, I found a company that exposes an API which lets me do that, and let me show you how I called it. So I'm going to open the backend folder here, and I've created a a file called send email, and in it you'll see there's a simple function called send notification. Now, when I place it in the backend folder here, what I'm indicating to Wix Code is that I want this to run on a server on the Wix cloud, which means that I can, by simply writing a function, I can have code running on the server without having to understand how that works, because I shouldn't need to understand how that works. And in fact, this is the magical part for me as a product manager, because I haven't actively written code in over 10 years. And this is part of the reason why I never made the jump to web development, because it was all of these pieces and all this orchestration was just too daunting for me to learn all of those stacks. But now with Wix Code, I can write a simple function, just indicate that I want it to run on the back end, and that's orchestrated for me. And in this case, I chose to do that because there's a secret key there. Let me show you how I can call that. So if we jump back to the page, you'll see that for me to have that available on my page, I don't need to understand how those network calls are made or how it's orchestrated. All I need to do is import the function there and say that I want it available to my page code. And now I'm going to paste this code in, and this code just does creates that message for me, and ultimately what it does is run that function as if it were a regular function on my page. So now when I preview my site and I vote on that artwork, let's move to the inbox. Let's move to the inbox that represents that user, and you'll see that that email has come in, indicating that there is a new vote for Built with Glass, and there are now 2 votes. Great. So that shows me how to call an external API and augment my site with things that others are doing. But let's show you the reverse. I want to expose an API so that others can integrate with me. And what we thought would demonstrate that nicely is if we created an attendance system so that students could check in as they arrive in class. And to do that, I'm going to go back to the backend folder here, and I'll create a new file called log attendance. And again, by creating that file, I'm indicating that this should run on a server. And I'll copy paste the code in here. And this is a little bit longer, but it's not rocket science. It was code I was able to write in a few minutes. Essentially, what it's doing is listening for that HTTP request. It is getting the student's name from it, querying the collection to find that student's attendance record, and then writing it back, updating it into the data set again. And so I'm going to publish my site, and now that the site is published, I have an API available on the internet, which can be called by simply sending an HTTP request my way. I'll show you in a minute how I do that from my phone, but what my students thought would be nice is if they would integrate it with a service called If This Then That. And for those of you who aren't familiar with this service, this is a company that facilitates these kinds of mashups between services on the internet that have APIs, and they make it really easy for me to mash up things and make things happen based on other services. So in this case, they've decided to hook up their phones to it and configure it such that when they connect to the school's Wi-Fi, an attendance check-in is sent automatically to my site. So let's go back to the site. Let's go back to the site and show you the attendance page that we've created. This is attendance for this course, visual editing. And as my students turn on their Wi-Fi, as they reach class, you'll see these start coming in. So we see that Jack is in class, and we see that Mark is also there. So we created a very rich web application by laying it out and designing it in the Wix editor, using the new Wix APIs to manipulate the elements on my page. We called an external service to further extend that. And finally, we created an API for other services to integrate with us.